Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I'm your host, Karen E. Osborne. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have a really interesting and special guest who has written this fascinating book. Her name is Sarah Brotherhood Chapman. Hey, Sarah.
Hi, how are you, Karen?
I am great, and I'm so glad that you're here. So Sarah has written a book called Shadows of the West. And it's a young adult historical novel. And it's based loosely, would you say, on your life?
Very loosely. The setting is more or less based on when I was living in Berlin, in 1977.
Oh, very cool. Let's just
It's totally fiction.
But it's fiction. Yeah.
It's fiction. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's dive right into that. First, tell us a little bit, like you're currently living in Germany now.
I am. I'm back in Germany. I was the daughter of a diplomat, an American diplomat. I was actually born in Germany, just where I popped out because we moved every 3 years or so of my whole childhood to different countries. And then I ended up marrying a man who got interested in the Foreign Service because of my father. And he then became a diplomat. And so the lifestyle continued. And now I've raised 3 children abroad and am back here now alone without the kids. And our last post before he retires in Munich.
Wow, wow. So you picked the year, such a fascinating year in history, 1977. Tell us everybody a little bit about what was happening in Germany in 1977.
Well, so by 1977, Berlin had been divided since, 1961. And actually, Berlin itself had been divided into the 4 Allied powers. So the French had a section, there was the French, American, British, and Soviet sectors. And by 77, the Soviet sector was cut off from the Western sectors, the American, French, and British, which were surrounded by a wall. So the Soviets were, sort of leading the East Germans to be a totalitarian state. I mean, essentially that's what it became. And they decided, because there was such a brain drain of people leaving to go to the West, that they would wall their people in. And the strange feeling living there was that, while we were in the free part, we were the ones walled in. So it was a little bit strange to wrap your mind around that. And we lived almost like a completely normal American town, in the American sector. And we had an American high school. And yet we were in this weird setting where right across the wall was a completely different world, where they were much less free and restricted in all sorts of ways. So it was a strange place to kind of get used to.
And how old were you?
I moved there as a junior in high school, and I graduated from Berlin American High School.
Yeah, my husband Bob and I have visited the remains of the wall. We visited Berlin, and we went to see the remains of the wall. So, all right, so this was your childhood, and you decided to write a book that is set there. So tell us a little bit about what inspired this story, and give us a sense of the story.
Well, it's I think what really inspired me to write this was that I had been friends with an East German family. And when, the wall fell down, we had kept up through the years. We wrote letters back and forth, and, they'd had a pretty tough situation over there, but then suddenly the wall came down and they were, quote, free, but even for them to wrap their minds around this newfound freedom and to fathom what that all meant and how they were now going to make their lives, profitable enough to live in a capitalist society was a huge issue. So, it was even that was kind of an emotional thing to go through with them. And so this friend of mine and his family ended up coming to stay with us, my husband and my kids and I, in Istanbul when we were living in Turkey. So they came to visit, and we had this fascinating reunion. It was the first time he'd ever been to my house, because when we were friends in Berlin, of course he couldn't come over. He couldn't go through the wall, right? So his children and my children were sitting there bombarding us with questions, saying, what was it like? And just the fact that even his kids didn't really know, didn't really understand what it was like on the ground, made me start thinking, it's already history, it's already kind of an ancient history. We never thought the wall was going to come down. Now it's down and everybody's forgotten about it. So I wanted to write something that was engaging. It's kind of a exciting story, fun to read, but made that period accessible to especially young adults, but really anybody.
Yeah. So what do you want your readers to take away from that then? These young readers, because you say it's an exciting story. You made it a fast-paced, kind of exciting, fun story.
Well, it's sort of emotional, because I was very affected by all this back then. It left a great impression on me, and I want some of that to convey. I want it to be a little suspenseful, to carry them along, but sort of through that whole storytelling, to just get a real feeling for what it was like. Because I also think that the perspective of the kids who lived there was pretty unique, really. Our parents all had something to do with the Cold War, most of them. But for us, down in the weeds at school, some of us were military kids, some of us were diplomatic kids, some of our fathers flew the Pan Am plane, because only Pan Am was allowed to fly into Berlin. So it was, we all had different sort of rules that we had to follow as being dependents of these different types of professions.
Yeah. Wow. Did you consider, when you were thinking about it, did you consider making it a memoir, or was always in your mind it was going to be fiction?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting question, because at first it was going to be way more of a memoir. But I felt I had to get the permission of a friend to do that. And this friend basically said no. And so, I had people telling me, well, don't listen to that. You should do it anyway. But I didn't feel comfortable. And actually, I'm glad I didn't in the end, because I think this is a more fun story. And yeah, it allows me to kind of just get carried away and go with it.
It's so funny you say that, because I have a book coming out in September that's historical fiction based on real people. And I thought about making it a memoir. And then I thought it was so freeing to be able to just make stuff up,
Yeah.
So
It's true.
So even though it's based on or inspired by real people and real events, fiction, and I like making stuff up, so I guess that was part of it too.
Yeah, it's a great responsibility to
It
write
is.
nonfiction.
It really is.
I mean,
You're
I'm
really meticulous.
debating my next book too, because I want to write about my grandmother's experiences in post-war Japan, and part of me wants to make it, just strictly by the book. But then I feel there's a lot of stuff I wouldn't want to tell, because she wouldn't want that in there, and I feel like I need to respect that, and because it becomes such a head game, you don't know. Yeah.
That's the same thing. Mine is about my grandma, and I just knew that she would not approve.
Yeah.
So I decided to just
Made it up.
fictionalize the whole thing, just make it all
Yeah.
up. So you are excitingly 2 days away from launch. 2
Yes.
days, and this wonderful book is coming out, Shadows of the West. So do you have a launch party planned? what have you got going
I
besides this?
do. I am just about to fly back to the United States, to New York, where my daughter lives, and a very close friend of mine is going to use her house as a place for me to have a launch party. Yeah, so that'll be really fun. I
That
don't
would
know. I
be.
don't really know what it even means, because I'm very much a debut writer, and all of this is a pretty steep learning curve. But I'll just invite whoever can come and take it from there. Have some
Take
books
lots of
there.
photos. Take lots of photos so that you can
Photos.
put them all
Okay.
on social media. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Right.
lunch parties can be very, very fun. So this show is What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing?
Hmm.
So can we talk a little bit about your reading life? Do you have like one genre you like? Do you mostly read historical fiction? Or what kind of reader are you?
I'm pretty much all over the place, I have to say, and I'm constantly wishing I read faster because there's so much I want to read. I love fiction. Recently I read A Gentleman in Moscow, which I
Yes,
absolutely loved. That
yes.
I it kills me. We lived in Moscow when I was a kid, and it was around the same time that book sort of takes place, maybe a little later. And I think my father would have eaten it up, but he died before he could read it, just before it came out, actually. I loved that. I've just read a book called Crying in H Mart,
Hmm.
about a Korean American girl whose Korean grandmother dies. No, it's her mother. Sorry, it's her mother. And it's a very emotional. And my mother also died when I was pretty young. So um, I, really related to her feelings as expat girl, and she wasn't really an expat, I guess, because she grew up in the States, but, with this other,
Other
um,
cultural life.
exactly. Uh, and yeah, I've read Gabor Mate's book recently called The Myth of Normal, which is a hefty book about, our brain and trying to be in touch with our authentic selves. And this is kind of another passion of mine, is how our brains work and how we, identify ourselves, and how much of our external world uh, sort of interferes with our inner voice, and all of this kind of stuff, which probably stems from being this kid who moved all over, and then an adult who moved all. I don't have roots. I don't
Mm.
really worry about it. I don't really think about it. But you hear you're supposed to worry. You hear that you're supposed to, feel lesser or whatever,
Or something.
or something. Anyway,
Yeah. So when people ask you, where are you from?
yeah,
What do you
that's that
what
question.
what do you answer?
Well, it really depends on where I am. If I'm overseas, I say I'm from the US. If I'm in the US, I say, well, I've grown up abroad. And then I let them, ask the next question. If they want to know specifics, I'll go into the list of countries, the fact that I was born overseas, But yeah, it's always a question. It's so funny because my son, he was probably about 10, and we were at a national park in the States, and a forest ranger asked him where he was from, and he said, America. We were living in Greece at the time. And the forest ranger just threw back his head and guffawed and said, well, I know you're from America, son, but where in America? And my son looked at me with this panic, what do I say? What do I say? So that's our story.
That's a great story. That's an awesome story. Thank you so much for this time together. And I hope you have enjoyed meeting Sarah Brotherhood Chapman. And I hope that now you have an opportunity, because this book is out in 2 days. So you can just go on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, you can go wherever you like buying books, and you can order this book. And now you've met the author. And isn't it fun reading a book that you've met the author? So I hope you will join us next Tuesday for the next episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Have a great day, everybody.